Hello, everybody, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Emma Desi. Thank you so much for being here. And today we're going to be talking about all things Enneagram, which I am really intrigued about because I have heard lots of bits and pieces about it, but I've not really put it all together. So I'm delighted that Dani Abernathy is here with me today, and she's going to be filling me in and helping me get up to speed on it. So welcome, Dani. Great to have you here.
Hi, thank you.
But just before we get started, I will just let you know a little bit more about Dani, who is an Enneagram teacher, but she's also an author accelerator book coach who helps novelists write their stories, the stories that they need to tell so that their readers can feel seen and can see others. She specializes in fantasy, soft sci-fi, and young adult. And Dani merges how story works, but also with how people work. And this helps to create books that help readers have more empathy for themselves and also for others. Through her Rooted Writers Mentorship, she helps novelists embrace, plan, and write the books they are proud of. Dani is a Capricorn. She is manifesting generator, INFJ. I always get those muddled up. And Enneagram Type 4. So I'm sure she'll fill us in on what that means later. But what I love about what Dani does is she really, really believes that stories can change the world, one reader at a time. So I love that that's part of your philosophy. But yeah, today we're talking about the Enneagram, how it can influence a writer, how it can help a writer. But first of all, I'm sure our listeners would love to know just a little bit more about you, Dani, and maybe you could tell us something about your own journey with writing to get us started.
Sure. I live in the United States in Arkansas, which is in the central part of the US.
Oh,
Sorry, I have a cough, so I'm muting myself to cough. I have two kids and a partner and two dogs, and I started writing novels seriously when my kids were babies, and I just motherhood was really hard, especially the younger they were, the harder it was. And so I just felt like I was kind of losing myself. And I also had postpartum depression that I didn't know that I had. And so I started writing kind of as a way to use my brain and have something for myself to get away and be in the quiet and just create something. So it became a really important part of my self-care and my kind of sanity and finding myself again as a mom. So I wrote several books, manuscripts, first drafts. Well, I wrote several books and got feedback on them and they weren't working. And this happened multiple times. And I paid an editor a lot of money to read my manuscript and give me feedback. And she told me it was wrong, but then I was just on my own to fix it. And I had no idea how to fix it. So I was just like, well, let's write another book. That'll probably fix the problems. And of course it didn't. So I got to a point where I was like, well, I guess I'm not a writer. I'm not supposed to do this because obviously I can't. And I'm just going to keep repeating the same problems. But fortunately, I had heard about book coaches, and so I reached out to one, and we ended up working together just for a couple months. But it was just transformative for my writing, but also for my life because I realized like, oh, I want to do this. I want to help people. I don't want people to experience the frustration and the loneliness that I did in my writing journey. So I became a book coach. I started my business in 2020, and it's just grown since then. I now have this wonderful group program for people who kind of have felt othered in whatever way. And like you said, I think stories are so powerful for helping people see beyond themselves. Well, first of all, to like accept themselves and to accept other people. And I just feel like if we could get all the world leaders to read fiction about people who are not like them, then the world would be a better place and we would have so much less like war and hatred and all these problems. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
Yeah, it's amazing actually how much that echoes my own experience
Mm,
as well, and how exactly like you, I was a stay-at-home mum with preschool kids, just felt myself disappear, undiagnosed postnatal depression, couldn't figure out why I kept crying all the time, what was wrong with me when my life was so good, I didn't understand. And I get, yeah, I took to journaling, and then that journaling kind of turned into a manuscript. And exactly as you say, it was just a way to find myself, a way to work out what was going on, and just have something that was mine and not
mm,
about the children. That was
yeah.
so, so important. Um, and similar to you, not exactly the same, but similar to you, I got to the end of my first book, and I just was so proud that I'd finished this first draft, even if I never did anything with it. And I remember thinking I would love to help women. I'd sort of past 40 by then, and I remember thinking I want to help women who are kind of 40 plus do the same. So not necessarily about other stories, but to have women realize you can still do this. This is still possible for
Mm,
you. You might think that you've reached a certain age and you're past it and that dream has passed you by, but actually we can all still do it if we absolutely want it. So
yeah.
yeah, I love that. So you found a coach, which I think is wonderful, and I really wish I'd done that earlier on, because I've subsequently hired a coach, and it is transformational, I know.
Mhm.
But then you went one step forward as well, and you decided to become certified. So tell us a little bit about that certification, because I think it's so people understand it's important that as coaches, we really do help people, and we can really help people craft a good story.
Yeah. So, so I learned so much from my book coach about how story works. And then certification uh, taught me so much more about how story works. And since then, I've learned, so much more as well from books and courses and stuff. But, I think one of the wonderful things about the Author Accelerator program, where we were both certified, is that it teaches you sort of the process of building a book and what to think about first, because so often for writers of all genres, but like I write fantasy and I coach a lot of fantasy writers. You just skip to these like cool things in your book, and and when you sometimes that's where the inspiration comes in, but you have to think about all these other layers of the story if you want it to be, a good story, a compelling story, especially if you want to kind of speak to your reader on an emotional level. You have to understand all these other layers, and so that for me was such a gift from Author Accelerator, learning um, almost the steps to creating a novel and like what the foundational pieces are that everything else can build on, so that I can, well, for myself, but also, for my clients, help them understand where to start. It also takes so much of the overwhelm out because you know the process, you see the steps. And as you know, I'm sure writing, especially in revision, is so overwhelming because there's just so many things to think about and do. And so having that process and the person, the coach with you in the process, it just it goes from like feeling like you're drowning in the sea of your story to feeling like you have a rowboat or something. You're not
Yeah.
getting drowned.
Oh, it is. It's just so special to have somebody go through that book with you, because if we're honest with ourselves as writers, nobody's as interested in our book as we are. Even the people who love us aren't that interested. So when you've got someone by your side who's going through it and it is invested in the story that you're desperate to tell, it's just so affirming that you're on the right track and you're doing the right thing, and it's not a waste of time, which a lot of my writers go through phases of feeling. Um, but yeah, so sort of talking about then that ups and downs and that part of the process. And I'm glad you said that it's a process. It's not something you bang out over a weekend and whoo, it's all perfect. This is very much a process. But I suspect then that kind of how we respond to that process as writers may kind of be impacted by the Enneagram type that we are.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
intrigued to know a little bit more about that. But just before we do, would you just, so for those who don't know about it or haven't heard of it, could you just give us a flavor of what it is? And maybe even a little, do you know where it originates from, where it came from?
Yeah. So So the Enneagram is this symbol. It's a circle with a bunch of lines. And the Enneagram it's like a psycho-spiritual personality system that helps you understand why people do what they do. So it's each type is a number. So type 1, type 2, type 3, all the way to 9. There's not like a progression from worst to best. Each type is valid. And we actually have all 9 types within us, but we have one dominant type. And so that type is the type that you hold the motivations, the desires and the fears of that type. And so the Enneagram is really, it's less about kind of behavior like, oh, you're an extrovert or you do this thing. And it's more about why do you do that thing? Because lots of different types can have the same behavior, but the reason they do it is different. And it actually, this symbol has been around for a long time, and there's lots of sort of math in it and stuff, and it's been around for centuries, but the modern version of the Enneagram started in the 60s, I think, in Chile with a guy named Oscar Ichazo, and then it kind of migrated to the United States with a guy named Claudio Naranjo, and it became popular in the 70s and the 80s, and since then it's kind of been picked up by Christian groups who've used it for, growth, and then also it's become popular just as a psychological tool. So I forgot what the original question was. Was that the question? Did I
No, I
answer
think
the question?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of answered it. It was just to give us a sort of overview of what it is and perhaps where it came from, because I didn't know these things. But you did say one thing there, which I love, and I think absolutely resonates with what we do as coaches, is that the Enneagram sort of helps you understand why you did something, not what you did. And that's a question that we're often asking our clients. Why has your character done this? Why has your character
Yeah.
done that? And so we get to apply that to ourselves.
Yeah. And so I use the Enneagram in my coaching, both to help writers understand themselves and to build their characters, because it's such a powerful tool, because it gives you that deep, it's like you get a fast track into what your characters really, what's really motivating them, which is so important for writing impactful story.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So you said in your bio that you are type 4, that's your dominant one. So learning that, what have you learned about yourself as a result?
So the type 4 is called the romantic sometimes, or the individualist. And we are, gosh, there's so many parts to the Enneagram that you can get into. So there is a lot of depth, but it's also, for me, a simpler system than like Myers-Briggs with all the letters. So the 4 is really motivated by the desire to be significant. And sometimes you use the word special, but 4s kind of hate that word because it doesn't feel important enough. So 4s want to be significant and have meaning, and they fear being insignificant. And so for me, learning about my type has really allowed me, well, first of all, I see when my type's defenses kind of come into play. So like when I go into a new social setting, I'm like, I don't belong here. The 4 often feels like an outsider, and like there's something like deeply inherently wrong with them. And so I notice that when I go into new social settings, or when I'm around people who I think have it all together and have figured out the secret that I'm missing or whatever. And then in my work, both my writing and my coaching, I have a different approach from someone who might be a type 1, which is kind of the moral perfectionist, or a 3, which is the achiever. And because I am very much focused on the writer themselves and what their sort of authentic truth is, who they are, and how that impacts their story. So I've learned to embrace that. I felt like that was wrong. And now I know, like, oh, that's actually a superpower. It's also a defense mechanism of how I've learned to like move through the world, but it's a gift that I bring. And my people want that. Not everyone wants that way of working through their book, but some people do. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a feeling I may be a 4. A lot of what you were saying was resonating with me. Particularly that feeling of wanting to have a purpose and to be extraordinary rather than
Yes.
ordinary.
Yes.
That's so interesting. So talk to me a little bit more about this. I think our listeners would be interested to know maybe just a little something about each number, and
Mhm.
you've perhaps observed about how that impacts the writer and how they approach their
Mhm.
writing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief little touch on each type, and I'll give you an observation from what I've learned of working with this type. I have to clear my throat again.
Oh, I'm excited about this.
Okay, so type 1 is called the perfectionist, but they don't identify with that word because the one isn't about sort of nitpicking their life. What they want to be perfect on the inside. They want to be morally good. So they fear that they are not good, that they're actually evil or corrupt deep down inside. And so they do their best to be good. So they are their own harshest critic. They have very high standards for themselves, and that can turn into high standards for other people. They always know sort of the right thing to do, and they are very responsible people. They're always going to do the right thing because they demand it of themselves. So as a client, as a writer, the one wants a system. They want to know the right way to do things. They are the type who's most likely to, well, maybe not the only type, but they want their book to be perfect, to be the best that it can be. And so they're going to put in all this time and energy to follow the system, to revise until it is perfect. So the one often struggles to say, okay, this is good enough.
Mhm.
I'm done.
Yeah.
The 2 is the helper, and they're part of the heart center. So 2, 3s, and 4s are part of the heart center, and all of these types need other people to kind of reflect back who they are. And so the 2 really hates to admit this, but they give love. They're so good at loving, and they give love in order to get love in return. And so they think, if I love you and care for you, then you're going to love me and care for me back. But the 2 doesn't express their needs. They think that having needs, they think it's not okay for them to have needs. And so they have all these kind of unspoken expectations of people, of how people should be caring for them. Um, and so that, that can cause some conflict, but the two is really warm and friendly and charming. And they are the type that makes you feel the best about yourself because they know how to help you and make you feel good. And they're called the helper, but the way they want to help really is to be this like special friend. They don't necessarily want to help you like move to a new house. They want to help you emotionally. And I haven't worked with a lot of 2s in my coaching, but those that I have, sometimes 2s struggle to acknowledge the darker parts of themselves, the negative emotions, the sadness. And so that can be challenging for the 2 to go to those places in their book,
Mm.
because they think that it's not okay to be sad.
Okay.
So that can be a challenge for the 2.
Yeah, certainly, because we need to go there
Yeah.
in our writing, don't we? And I'm thinking particularly of memoir writers, and I'm thinking of one in particular who just sort of wants to tell the story, but we know that that story is going to be so much more powerful and help other people more if they get messy and sticky and dark
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
manuscript. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So the 3 is called the achiever. They think that they are not worthy of love. And so in place of love, they want to get respect and admiration. So they think, if I can be the best, then people will at least admire me and respect me. And so they pick an area of their life where they're going to excel, and they excel in that area. So a lot of times 3s are pro athletes or doctors or attorneys or really successful business leaders, like whatever their field is,
Mhm.
they excel in that. Jenny Nash is a 3. She runs Author Accelerator. Dallas Travers is she's my business coach. She is also a 3. And so they're really smart. They are great leaders. And in writing, they 3s value efficiency, and they don't want to get stuck doing something that doesn't work, and because it threatens their achievement, their success. If they're doing something that doesn't work, they want to move on from it. And so it can be challenging for a 3 to do the long process of writing a book because it's not always linear. It's quite iterative, and it's a lot of like rethinking and kind of struggling in a lot of ways, especially if they're trying to write something that's personal to them. So that can be challenging for the 3, and 3s often want to just move through the list and check things off and get things done when they need to kind of go a little deeper and sit in that discomfort more.
Yeah, I can kind of hear people saying to me who may well be 3s, well, I don't want to write that because what if it doesn't go in the book and then that will have been a waste of time. That's
Or they
hard to
say,
love it.
like, why is this taking so long? Like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this because it's taking so long. Or
Okay.
because this, I realize I need to change all these things. So like I didn't do it right. Let's scrap this and do something that I know is going to be more successful.
Okay.
hmm
It's like just burning it all down. Let's just start again, and next time I'll get it right.
Yeah. Or let's just move on and not write a book because clearly I'm not going to be successful at this.
Mm.
Also, 3s really want their book to be successful.
Okay.
They want to have a bestseller. They want to be thought of as a good writer and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm thinking of someone. Yeah. All right. Cool. So that's 3.
So the 4, as I said before, is kind of this romantic individualist, and the 4, they want to be significant, they want to be important, they fear that they're not. They also feel like they have this deficit internally. 4s use mystery and intrigue and like these curated emotions to kind of draw people in. They're part of this heart center, and so they need people to reflect back to them their specialness, their uniqueness. And 4s are the most comfortable with the dark, sad emotions. That's where they feel 4s think that if I have need, if I am broken and vulnerable, and then people will be drawn to me and they will help me and they will love me. So 4s, unlike the 2, which kind of dwells in this happy place, the 4 is like, oh, I'm going to use my sadness to like form relationships and find love. So as a writer, the 4 is very comfortable, writing these deep, dark, intense, intellectual, even things, but they very much follow the muse. And so if the muse no longer wants to write this, then they're not going to do it anymore. They're just going to abandon it. And the 4 really feels misunderstood easily. So if someone, whether that's a critique partner or their partner or a reader or their editor, doesn't get it and they don't feel heard, then the 4 will withdraw and kind of often like abandon the project.
Okay. Gosh, right. Yeah, I'm hearing myself in a lot of that. Especially the dark side, wallowing in the dark. That's fine.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's so fun to wallow in the dark. So next we have the 5, and we're moving into the head center, which is all about intellect and using knowledge to kind of navigate through the world. So the 5 is the researcher. They want to understand the true nature of everything. So they fear that they won't have enough to navigate the world. And so they gather knowledge as a way of figuring out how to move through the world. All this head types 5, 6, and 7 do this, but 5s are the most they can be hermits. They can really like go into their research hole and not come out. They want to observe without changing what they're observing. And they can really go, just like fours can go to this deep, dark emotional place, fives can kind of go to this deep, dark mental place. And so they can be like, well, this is the truth of what's happening and it's really terrible. And, um, but they're also, experts and scholars. And so the five the fives I work with at least are often, fantasy writers. And so they build these huge worlds and, fives and nines both tend to do this. They just get lost in the world building and they build these intricate sort of systems and histories and all these things because that's what's fun for them. Um, and yeah, they want to understand how everything fits together. They also tend to write to kind of explore or express something that they are interested in or exploring or have learned.
Okay.
Mhm.
Gosh. So I'm thinking sort of epic fantasy people where it's really like, I'm thinking George R. Martin, somebody like
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
where
Yeah. Or J.R. Tolkien. Yeah. Hmm.
so that's actually a question I was going to have for you. I wonder, just anecdotally, or perhaps there is, have you noticed that different types prefer different genres, or actually is there a broad spread?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I think it might not be a genre thing as much as, well, it might be a genre thing. Nines and fives. I have a lot of nine clients and they tend to, I'll just skip to the nine. So the nine is the peacemaker and they want to have peace in their lives. They want things to be in harmony. They don't want there to be conflict. And so the nine tends to fall asleep to themselves, to their own desires, and just be like, whatever you want is fine. And so they actually have really strong preferences on thoughts and personalities, but they appear to not. So so they can sometimes be stubborn. But for the nine, getting lost in this fantasy world, nines tend to be kind of dreamy. They really enjoy video games, for example. And they will get lost in world building because it is safe and they can create kind of the world they want. And so sometimes, especially if the client also happens to have ADHD, the writer, then it's really hard for them to kind of pull back and actually write the story because there are just so many ideas and it's so enjoyable to be in the ideas without having to like commit and choose because that can potentially cause conflict.
Okay. So that's oh, I'm just curious then, like from a coaching point of view, is that quite tricky then? Because you want, obviously, as coaches, we want the writer to write their book, not
Mhm.
not kind of lean into what they think that we want. Because we can guide
Mhm.
people, we don't have all the answers for their story.
Sure. So I think the thing with the nine is that they will be like, yeah, sure, for sure. Yeah, let's do that. But then they're not actually going to do that. They're going to grind they're going to dig their feet in. They're going to be like, no, 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 no. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm just not going to acknowledge it to you. So for the nine, and the way I work with people actually is a really slow, deep, writer-centered process. And it's really about who are you? Why are you writing? Like, what do you care about? How do you want to speak to your reader and impact the world through your book? And so for nines, but all of my clients, um, it is a slow process of discovery, finding the courage to acknowledge like what you're really writing about, what you really want to say. But the nine can sort of jump ship and switch to something else if it starts to feel dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and that is, well, it's sort of there is a bit of danger, isn't it? When you write a book, you're creatively putting yourself out there. The plot line itself might be sort of going into dangerous territory that
Mhm.
you didn't know you were going to end up in.
Yeah.
It's not what you thought you were writing about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, tricky. Let's jump back to number 6 then.
Okay, so 6 is the loyalist. Sixes, if you hear people talk about sixes, you often talk about how they are afraid, but the 6 does not identify with being afraid. The 6 is actually afraid of being afraid. And so the 6 wants security in their life. They want kind of assurance, but they don't trust themselves to know what's right. And so they look to other systems or people to help them find that certainty, to tell them what to do, how to behave. And the 6 is constantly sort of scanning and assessing and thinking forward to like, okay, what might happen here and how do I deal with that? Because they don't want to be afraid. They don't want to be caught off guard. So they're always sort of scanning, doom forecasting, like looking for danger. They're kind of the alarm system of the Enneagram because they can be like, hey, did anyone notice this huge thing over here that might come and kill us all or whatever? And they tend to be kind of like us versus them. They like find their group that makes them feel secure and they really cling to that, but they are also constantly testing it to see like, is this true? Is this real? But also if that is threatened, if someone threatens their group, then they're gonna sort of from the back rally the troops to go attack that thing. So they have this kind of hot and cold feeling. They can be one moment really like bold and facing the danger, and then other moments really fearful of it. And the 6 themselves has the most rapidly changing emotions, which is interesting. And they often don't, if they test as a 6, they're like, no, I'm not a 6, because their experience is so dependent on the circumstance in that moment. So I suspect I work with more 6s than have realized they're 6s. They have a hard time. They have a hard time committing to a story because they can see so many possibilities and they feel like they need to speak to every person who might read their book. They need to include all the caveats. They need to it's hard for them to narrow in and be okay with just saying the one thing because there are always so many possibilities and like options and caveats. So that can be challenging for the 6. And they also tend to doubt themselves a lot.
Okay. Yeah. That hard time committing to, and it is hard. I mean, when you think about it, we're creating worlds, so there is endless possibilities. But I think this comes back to one of the things that we're taught by Jenny, which is understanding why you're writing the story, what it is you're trying to say about life with the story, what the sort of messages of your story. And once you get clear on that, that can help you shape the story going forward, or your characters' drivers going forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, I recognize that in 1 or 2 of my clients. Yeah.
So the 7 is called the enthusiast or the adventurer, and they're the last type in the head center. They are afraid of being stuck in painful or boring situations. So they do their best to avoid them. And so they're constantly, all of the head types, 5, 6, and 7 are kind of always scanning and planning. And 7s are always planning the next exciting thing because they are like, even if they're in a moment they've planned, they're like, okay, well, this is boring. I'm losing interest in this. So let's plan the next thing. And so they tend to move from adventure to adventure. They are visionaries. They are often kind of like eccentric or like trendsetters. They can be really funny. So can the 6. Actually, a lot of comedians are the 6 because they feel really comfortable in that kind of like dark, treading the line between like humor and darkness. 7s can also be quite funny. They're very vibrant and high energy. They know how to make everyone have fun, but then they want to keep staying in the fun. So they have a hard time finishing things. They have a lot of ideas, but they're not great at executing and following through. And so in writing, they might have a lot of started projects, but not finished projects. And
shiny penny.
yes. So that's the biggest challenge for the 7. And also sometimes accessing that deeper, more raw layer of emotion and conflict and truth can be challenging.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So did I understand 7 was adventurer and 8?
8 is the protector. They're in the gut type. 8, 9, and 1 are in the gut type, and they kind of move through the world through their instinct. 8s they're afraid of being vulnerable or taken advantage of. So they try their best to be invulnerable and to be in control. I think 8s are sometimes misunderstood because 8s can be very aggressive and controlling and like bears barreling through, China shop or something. But they're not always that way. They tend to have really strong beliefs and this intuitive knowing. They either are the protectors of the weak, or they really disdain people who appear to have vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and they can actually take advantage of those and kind of push those buttons. They want to know the truth, and so they will push people to reveal the truth. So while the 9 is like the peacemaker, like let's be chill and have no conflict, the 8 is like, oh, conflict is where we live. So they are very comfortable being confrontational and saying the thing and having those conversations. I don't think I've had any 8 clients, perhaps because 8s don't want to ask for help. That's very challenging for the 8 because it is a weakness or a vulnerability. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge for the 8 would be getting feedback, getting help on the book, because they want to just say that they don't know, or to see that what they're doing isn't working, or that they need to kind of be vulnerable and let someone in. That is very, very challenging for the 8.
Oh, that's a hard place to be. I've certainly had times like that in my life, and it's only when you come out of it you realize, oh, if only I'd just asked for help, actually I would have solved that problem much sooner.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be a difficult thing to admit that we're infallible or we're fallible rather.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was a whistle stop tour, and I'm guessing that our listeners, our viewers, they can see themselves in at least one of these. They're going to recognize, oh, I do that. I do. I don't want to kind of, if something's not working, I will stop it and I will move on. Perhaps I'm the achiever. I'm number 3. I'm sure a lot of people will be recognizing themselves in 5 and perhaps 9, and staying in that research rabbit hole where it's fun and it's all creative and not the sort of graft of having to put the words down and write the story. So I'm sure everybody's going, yeah, do you know what? I'm not sure I believed in this, but I can totally see.
Yeah.
So if we can see this in ourselves and we see how it drives, as you said at the beginning, why we do what we do, the ways in which it drives us, then I can absolutely see that this could be a wonderful tool to use in the writing itself and developing our characters. And so I'm even doubly excited, more excited than I was before we chatted, but I am super now, because we're going to delve into that, aren't we? You're very kindly coming in to give a presentation about the Enneagram and how we can use it in our fiction. So I wonder if you would just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a workshop, the personality of fiction, using the Enneagram to write really amazing books and deep characters. The wonderful thing about the Enneagram in your characters is that it gives you a shortcut to who they really are deep down inside. A lot of character tools are like, what time of day do they get up? Do they like cats or dogs? Like, what's their pet peeve? And those things don't really matter that much. What really matters is who they are deep down inside, what they want, what they fear. And when you know that, um, it it just changes the way you write them. It changes the way you think about their character arcs, how they interact. And the Enneagram can it's also a great tool because you can differentiate your characters. You can make them each distinct and individual. And when you know their type, you know how they're more likely to communicate or respond in a situation. And so it kind of removes some of that, like, your characters are much less likely to kind of conform to whatever the plot needs and
Mhm.
really be uh, consistent within themselves. So I'm gonna I'm gonna tell you all about the Enneagram. I'm gonna tell you about the types in more even more detail than I did here. I'm gonna give you some examples, but I'm also gonna give you tools to think about based on what you're writing or who these characters are, how you can find their Enneagram types and use them to deepen your story, to write a more impactful story.
Fantastic. Oh, that is amazing. That's going to be, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can tell. I can imagine that there's already going to be a lot of giggles as people recognize things about themselves. And you know, if someone's working on a manuscript already, they may unwittingly have been using some of these behavior types, and so they can
Mhm.
kind of lean into it even more and drive that story. So that's where that is going to, that's the personality of fiction, using the Enneagram personality system to develop unforgettable characters. And that's on Thursday, July 25th, 2024 at 11 a.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. UK, no, 6 p.m. I've got my times mixed up. 6 p.m. UK time and 2 a.m. I think that must be Australian time. So
Yes. Mhm.
we've got a whole range. But the good news is, if it is 2 a.m. your time zone, do register because there will be a replay available. And this is going to be a 2-hour workshop. So it's very much a workshop. So come prepared.
Mhm.
And it's going to revolutionize the way that you're writing. And as you've seen, Dani is an expert coach and Enneagram teacher. She will get you going in the right way. So if you want to go and sign up for that, you can go to emmadesi.com/Enneagram. And I will, of course, put the link to that in the notes. And I will also link to Dani's website and her Instagram and so on, so that you can find out more about her. So tell us, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say about the workshop? And then finally, I'd love to know a little bit more about your coaching program that you've got. I'm sure people would be interested in that.
Yeah. I think the thing I would say about the workshop is it's gonna be a little bit of a fire hose because, I'm giving you all these 9 types and telling you all these things about them. But if you love personality stuff, if you are the person who takes it, whether it's the BuzzFeed version of the personality quiz or like the all of the personality tests, like, come to the workshop. You're gonna love it. And it's gonna give you some new tools and also some new insight into yourself. Um, so I work with people. I have a year-long group coaching program called the Rooted Writers Mentorship. We use the Enneagram in that. And the beautiful thing about this program is that it gives you the process and the knowledge you need. It gives you the feedback because you get feedback. I look at your work and I give you feedback, and you get the community. And so the writers in this program are just beautiful, bookish weirdos. Most of us hold some sort of marginalized identity or a neurospicy or whatever. And we're all writing books kind of for our own healing in a lot of ways, and our own self-discovery, and to speak to the people who are like us
Mhm.
and to the people who haven't understood us so that we can form connection and empathy. And I talk about this kind of quiet book revolution, and like we're putting out these books that are just sort of going out silently into the world and, you know, helping someone see something new. Um, so yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, come check me out and get on my mailing list. I send a lot of really you'll know if you're my person if you get on my mailing list because you'll either unsubscribe immediately or you'll be like, yes, give me more. So yeah,
And that's at daniabernathy.com, is that
that's
right?
right. DANI. Yep. Hmm.
Cool, lovely. Dani, it's been a pleasure. I've loved finding out more about you, and also about the Enneagram, and I'm super, super excited to learn even more and how I can incorporate this into my fiction. when we meet on the 25th. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. See you then.